Welcome to How I Broke That.
Nathan Hammond has never been afraid to speak his mind or break a rule, especially if it meant he was going to improve his life or, more importantly, the lives of others. As an American-born kid growing up in Austria, he thrived on standing up and standing out, which made him a natural-born entrepreneur. But Nathan's ability to be a breaker and be better would also get him into trouble in elementary school and even into his first job as a German teacher in Syracuse, New York. By listening to our show today, you'll learn what it was like for Nathan growing up in Austria and Germany, the son of missionaries, and having to fit into the European culture and even their school system. How he took his passion for being a breaker into the classroom as a teacher and turned his classroom upside down with technology for 2 decades. And how Nathan turned conversations with his superintendent and other faculty into a full-time job as an ed tech entrepreneur with a new thriving product, Hallpass. Breakers, band together and be ready to hear hilarious and heartwarming stories from Nathan Hammond. Nathan, join the show. Let's have some fun.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, man. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Where are you located?
So I'm in York, Pennsylvania. So not New York, but York.
Okay. I know it very well.
Yeah.
But we're going to start our journey. We're going to cross the pond here much further. And let's start in Austria and talk about what it was like growing up the son of missionaries and how that influenced you.
Yeah. So I moved to Austria when I was 3 years old. And I think I learned to read and write first in German. And my parents went over as missionaries for a non-denominational mission organization. And it was interesting. It was super rich environment to grow up in. And I recognized that fairly early on. We had either people from the States coming to visit us or when we would go back every couple of years to the States. Just the conversations I had, the adults I was around. I think that really provided a lot of interesting perspectives and things like that. And just growing up as a son of a missionary kid in Austria, it was a fairly, I'm not trying to use this in a pejorative, but it was fairly narrow-minded in terms of religions. There was not a lot of, even though the Protestant Reformation came from that part of the world, you'd think that there was a lot more understanding of denominations, but it was an interesting environment where I was challenged, or just people did not quite understand what is an evangelical, so I remember writing down, or my parents remember writing down on my 3rd grade application for school, or maybe it was earlier even, what is your faith? You had to put down your religion as part of your school application, and my parents put down evangelical, and apparently they crossed that out and wrote OB, which is ohne Bekenntnis, which means has no faith.
Okay.
So that was that's just a bit of a flavor for I wasn't persecuted or anything like that, but it was
different.
I grew up knowing that my parents' faith stood them out differently, and they were in an environment where they were often held in suspicious or thought that they were part of a cult, and so that it caused me to grow a backbone. It caused me to understand and investigate, what do I believe, and things like that. And that influenced me then later on. I'm pretty sure, that it contributed to me being comfortable, being different, and standing out. But it also was a lot of good stuff there too, with on the positive side that really, sort of swells your head a little bit, when kids are like, my friends would brag to other friends, hey, this guy's an American. I'm like, no, he's not. He speaks German just like us. You're just joking, or you're just.
Didn't you have we talked about this earlier, but you had a Nerf ball, which was kind of cool.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and when
So
I think about your stories, sometimes people ask me like, why do you do this show? And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
well, I get to talk to people in such a different way.
yeah,
And then it just dawned on me that probably one of the reasons I'm so interested in your story here is, we're in Mexico. We have an only child. And, we have people coming to visit us in less than 2 months for Day of the Dead, and
yeah, yeah,
their families will come and they'll see these celebrations and they'll see fireworks and eat food they wouldn't have had,
yeah,
even though Mexico is pretty close to the U.S. And then when we go home, our daughter says, "Hey, I live in Mexico," and they're like, "New Mexico Avenue in Northwest DC? No. Mexico the state? New Mexico state? No. The
yeah,
country." So it's kind of being a little bit different, and
yeah,
that's cool if you've
yeah.
got the backbone and the confidence.
Yeah,
Um,
and kids like us are called third culture kids, right?
yeah,
Because we grew up in our parents are one culture, and we have that strongly embedded in us. But then we're growing up in another culture, and that's strongly embedded in us. But we're not really at home unless both of those are there, and
that's
that
cool.
makes that third culture. And there are studies done about third culture kids, and it's a fascinating group of kids. There's a lot of talent and a lot of it's just a rich culture to be that in that that third culture.
Right. And
So
then do you count boarding school as a fourth culture? So talk about your boarding school experience at 16 in Germany.
yeah, so I spent my sophomore year in the States, and when I headed back, my parents had kind of prepared me that hey, when we go back, the Austrian school system is just so different. They're going to have a hard time recognizing that year in the States, and so we had looked into a couple of different things. Homeschooling was one. Could I go to maybe the American International School or the Vienna International School, which were sort of diplomat kid schools in my city. We applied to some of them, but I wasn't a priority kid for that, and for that, it wasn't the audience that they were catering to, and me joining in so late, they didn't have a lot
Mhm.
of room or any room. So the best option turned out to be about 12 hours away in southern Germany, and I left home essentially as a I guess I was just almost 17, but I was 16, and I hopped on a train with I think my parents drove me there the first time, but it was just a really rich environment. It was about 25% were business kids or military kids, and about 75% were missionary kids. And they were from probably 30 different countries. My dorm had maybe 20, 25 kids, and they probably
Mm.
spoke 15 different languages. It was hilarious. It was amazing to just it was totally it's just a very rich environment to again be realize things can be done differently in lots of different ways, and people consider this normal, other people consider that normal,
Mm.
and it just the adults there were all basically volunteers. They wanted to be there. They had raised support to be there. They loved on kids. It was a bit strict, as you would have to be for a boarding school. And the 2 years that I was there was perfect. Had I been there a third year, I might have been, a hellraiser or whatever. I would have
Right.
the rule breaker in me would not have would have started to fight sort of the belief system that I had, and you know, I I just found that I became a good student in those 2 years. Up
Mm.
to that point, I kind of sucked as a student. I was an average student at best.
Right.
I studied hard. I tried, but nothing came natural to me. And part of that was because I had two languages, two ways of doing things. It was just
Yeah.
some of that affected me. But in general, I was not. Even if I had only been in one culture, I would not have been a super student. But
Okay.
yeah,
So not a super student, and in the most respectful way, and I mean this actually, because most people when they say uh, I'm being respectful, they're generally not. But you're a rule breaker, and it's kind of like ingrained in you in a good way, and it benefits others. But I'm going to jump ahead to when you started teaching, and you and I have some, we took some notes ahead of time, and one of the notes that I took and you wrote down and emphasized was that you started teaching, and you had your first 3 years of teaching, and then you entered, quote, the darkest time in my life. And can you talk us through the first 3 years of teaching and how that could have led to the darkest time?
Yeah. So, I just the fact that I considered a teaching career was kind of almost laughable, knowing where I had come from up until my junior and senior year of high school. Those 2 years kind of helped bridge that mental gap that, yeah, I could go into teaching, but I don't think I considered teaching until maybe somewhere in my towards the end of my freshman year. I thought, well, I'll choose German teaching as a backup plan because I already speak German, so I just need the teaching degree part. Anyway, most of my peers sent out, especially in education, hundreds of resumes to all kinds of schools everywhere, trying to get an application in or trying to get a job. I think I sent out 4 resumes because I knew there had to be a German job posting, and either there was one or there wasn't. And that was pretty easy to tell. And so the interview that I got was, 8 hours north of where I was. And I thought, oh, or 6 hours, however long it is. Yeah. And I thought, well, I can move to a new city. That's not a problem. But it was really challenging. I was responsible for 5. My interview went great. I got the job. I was super excited. I moved up there, got rented an apartment. I knew nobody in that city. Just tried to work day in and day out at your craft. But my craft contained 5 different subjects: German 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or at least I think there was a German 5. I can't remember. But and then I coached on top of that, and I had discipline issues, and they were manageable, but I remember being like a fish out of water, just totally. I had never experienced so much pressure to survive each day. It was really, I don't know. I haven't really talked to many other first year, teachers. Once you pass that stage, you don't. You talk about it sometimes, but I remember I had to call my parents sometimes in the morning. They were 7 hours ahead. They were still in Austria, just to get kind of a pep talk to go to school, because it was really tough. And I remember thinking I was ill prepared, and maybe I was, and maybe it was just the challenge of having taken over a position that was, the person retired, and there was some history of discipline issues already that had built up. I came along as a super young guy, and while I think I was able to control some of them, there was just this culture of making life difficult for the teacher and the students enjoying it, and I just couldn't break out of that.
That does not sound like the German way of learning or teaching.
Right. Yeah, right. And so what happened is I walked in one morning at 7:30. I got married in the meantime. My bride moved up to Syracuse with me, and I walked in at 7:30, and principal's office, and they said, sorry, just your 3rd year is up, but we're letting you know we're not offering you tenure, and you can go back to class now and teach.
Sweet.
I was
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Yeah. But I mean, they were nice people. I truly had no idea that that was the trajectory. I just, for the next 2 months, just spent an awful lot of time reflecting. What else could I do? I couldn't imagine anything else that I wanted to do that would offer me the career salary that I was looking for. Was kind of ironic, because when I got hired, I told the superintendent there, I don't know how I could possibly, commit, signing this contract to teach for you. I don't see myself being a teacher for the rest of my life. Or I just couldn't imagine that. And I was like, no, we're just looking for a 5-year commitment. I'm like, well, that's longer than all of college. I don't know. But I signed. And then in the end, 3 years into it, I was dumbfounded that I was not getting tenure, and I didn't know what that meant. Was I really not cut out for teaching? And what should I do? And I ended up.
Further proof that the question of where you see yourself in 5 years is a stupid one. So we're going to move pretty quickly into the portion of what you're doing now, but real quickly, kind of walk us through, like, you know, so that didn't work out, but you did really begin to find your groove in teaching. And to me, having known you, not for too long, but getting to know you, it seems like you needed to be in a position where you were able to be creative, even if it was inside the classroom, and potentially teach a different way, but certainly be effective at it. So, talk about, get us from your darkest day to, you got to do the next 2 decades,
Yeah,
in
yeah,
a minute
yeah,
here.
yeah. So I moved back to my wife's home area, back to York. I got a job, and the first week of school, I had some kind of a conflict with a student, and the student goes, "Well, you tell me, you're the teacher," and that was the the most challenge I got as a teacher, and I'm like, I love this place, and
Yeah.
the school was very focused on technology, which was a growing area of interest to me, and I started really wanting to harness technology to solve some of the rote problems that teachers have. Technology can do, especially for a language teacher, vocabulary quizzes. That was kind of my entry point into really trying to solve problems. Couldn't the computer correct vocabulary quizzes a lot faster and a lot more efficient, with a lot more flexibility than I can just giving them a paper, a static quiz,
Right.
and so I started researching some of that. But yeah, I ended up, getting in trouble by taking 25 computers from different seasoned teachers who weren't using them at the time, and moving them into my classroom without asking the appropriate person, the tech coordinator, whoever it was, and I did it because I was solving a problem. I wanted my students to be engaged. I had figured out a way that I thought I could engage them, and I needed 25 computers. They weren't using them, so in my mind, education trumped, right, and the needs of the
Right.
students trumped whatever, them sitting in the other classroom. I was certainly going to put them all back the way I found them. Um, and but so that mentality kind of grew in me, and I found myself then getting rid of my textbook. That was around 2008, and wanted to really turn. I wanted to focus my German instruction. Could I teach without being in front of the classroom the whole time? Like, could I
Yeah.
record video and ask questions? Could I change the homework from written homework to mostly spoken homework, and just turn all that upside down? And it started working. And I didn't do it myself. I got trained. And I was a slow learner, so I went back multiple
Right.
times to get that training. But it was a small group of us German teachers that were trying to teach with a different philosophy. That led to then, trying to help teachers learn how to integrate technology into their world language courses, which then translated into helping teachers more broadly into a
Yeah.
grad course. That grad course ended up being at my school. We had about 100 teachers that attended, and we wanted to move that further into other places. And
Yeah.
that was sort of the beginning of the first business, EduSpire. And I had started helping my principal solve some software related issues in my school. One of them was the club database. It was something that drove every assistant principal, because it wasn't the principal that got it. he
Right.
handed it off to the assistant, and it was always done with spreadsheets. And so I said, well, there's a better way. This could be done with if a programmer could get a hold of this, we could do something with this. And so I wasn't a programmer, but I had a friend of mine who was able to help, and so we got him paid, and we developed a program, and that kind of grew. My superintendent eventually, I with the growth of the first business, I approached my superintendent and said, look, I'm kind of distracted here. I like both things that I'm doing. I love helping teachers with these
Hmm.
grad courses, but I also love teaching students. And I'd like to take some time off just to kind of visit a couple of teachers and get really back into the groove of curriculum, and get some inspiration there, because the business was inspiring in a natural way. And so yeah, my superintendent was rather difficult in that initial meeting at
Yeah.
first, but he created a new role for me. offered it to me. I didn't really want to take it, but a weekend thinking about it, I realized, yeah, that's really what I need. So I stepped down and worked part-time for the school district developing software, and part-time for
Yeah.
my emerging company, EduSpire Solutions.
That's nice. So it reminds me as you're telling the story, and you and I talked before, obviously, and you said, hey, I was kind of solving problems for teachers, and probably that was solving something for maybe the PTA, and you were solving problems for the assistant principal and the assistant superintendent. You remind me of the guy from Shawshank, the guy who could get everything done. If you just asked him, he would figure it out. He'd get you cigarettes or he'd get you a hammer or something like that, and I certainly can respect that. And you became that go-to guy. And then there has been a line that you have crossed over, where now out of the classroom and you are running this business with your business partners, who I met, seem like fantastic people, very smart. And one of your most recent innovations, is Hallpass. And I have to tell the story of how we met. We were at Whiskey, and I was waiting for somebody to meet me, and you were standing there, and you and I are pretty good at talking. And we just started talking. And then, I kind of said my background, and content creation, relationship nurturing, the education space. And Nathan
And you
said,
mentioned entrepreneur, and that was kind of when I heard that, I'm like, oh, I need to ask you, because you're a risk taker probably.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
had this idea that my team was just not so settled with yet. And so,
right,
yeah, go
right.
ahead. Go ahead.
And so Nathan and I, we connect on Entrepreneur, and Nathan says, and everybody's giving crap away at this, actually I have like, pens and so many things from that event,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
right around me here,
yeah.
and Nathan's like, I'm thinking about making a squeeze ball that's like poop. What do you think about that? And I'm like, tell me more, And so we connected on that, and there is a connection. Talk about Hallpass, and then tell us why you want to make poop squeeze balls.
Right. So, being in a school that had a lot of technology, we were, the term one-to-one is fairly familiar in every educational circle. But this was, about 5 years before COVID hit, and it just dawned on me that the whole hall pass procedure of writing out paper passes was, nobody had ever invented a better way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a better way of doing it if you just thought about it from a standpoint of, hey, if every kid has a device, if a school is one-to-one, couldn't students request a pass digitally on their device? And then couldn't the system check to see whether the kid should be approved or not? One of the issues that teachers had was too many kids, or educators, the principals, too many kids in the hall or whatever. So you get a phone call or an all call saying, hey, teachers, please don't write any more passes, or they be in a faculty meeting or something like that. But so that idea matured in my head, and I started talking to my principal and to a lot teachers in my building, and that was kind of the birthplace or the inception of the idea for Hallpass, which it basically has students creating a hall request on their device. The system checks, hey, how many passes are already in the hall, or how many passes are you allowed to write, or is there somebody in the hall that you're not allowed to be in the hall with, and then approves the pass only if you clear all those principal hurdles or the principal settings. But the squeeze ball, the
Let's show people how your mind really works.
So, everybody, we started collecting stories about, oh yeah, we have a problem in our hall, or some people would come up to us and tell us, yeah, we actually had somebody pooping in the hall, or we had a mystery pooper that pooped in the stairwell. And I'm like, yeah, that's elementary, right? No, it was middle school or high school. Now, we didn't hear this all the time, but I heard it a couple of times. And one of the people that worked for us was actually from a school that had that happen to her and in her school. So I thought it was just her school, and then nope, we heard it from 2 or 3 others. But just in general, where do all kids want to go? They all want to write a hall pass to the bathroom, and every school, not every school, but majority of schools have hall issues. And so we decided, or the thought came to me, hey, if we just, embrace this and just, put on maybe the background of our when we're at trade shows, got poop emoji going on in your halls, we clean up the mess, or
Yeah.
something like that. And when we started doing that, my partners were like, no, you can't. It just was too. It was too out of the ordinary for a
Ready?
business minded person. And I'm like, no, I think this has the right, it sets the right tone. It doesn't take us too seriously. It injects some humor. It addresses the issue. And when we started doing that a couple of times, we started noticing teachers coming up and taking selfies with our backdrop
Yeah.
and saying, oh, I got to send this to my principal. We've got issues going on. So then I thought, well, what if we had a mascot? What if I wore a toilet, a toilet mascot? So I researched that, but you're not allowed to wear mascots around conferences too much, but anything just to
Oh, man.
draw a little attention but we ended up settling on, okay, we should probably do like a poop emoji and put a QR code on the bottom of the poop emoji, give people a stress ball.
Yeah.
The halls are causing them stress, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, you and I thought it was a brilliant idea. I don't think you and I have gone as deep down into this, toilet discussion to talk about mascots, but offline, I'll tell you all my experience as a mascot because I
Very
spent
good.
many years as Mountain Dewey the dolphin at the Baltimore
Okay.
Aquarium. So I can tell
Okay.
you all about what it's like doing that. So let's but let's get out of the toilet for a second. And Hallpass, what I like about it, which also a lot of the solutions that we see, it's going to improve efficiency. It's going to improve culture. Obviously, check. That's what you're looking for. You know, and then let's. It's not really the elephant in the room, but let's talk about safety. Because safety is so important in hallways right now, especially in schools.
Right, right. So, the issue that schools have is they're tasked with knowing where kids are, and having, safety in mind at all times. And we realized early on when we developed eHallpass that, there is a strong argument and a strong natural tie into safety, because all these kids that are that are creating hall passes, some of them are frivolous. So being able to hold kids accountable to not write a frivolous hall pass request, and to be held accountable for how often they are in the hall helps to reduce hall traffic. But in an emergency or for security purposes, when you have a kid going from one room to another room, they're not supervised by an adult. And if you happen to have a lockdown or some kind of an emergency drill or a real emergency, those kids are on their own to try and find safety. And what most schools do when they drill that is every teacher opens their door, they do a hall sweep, and they sweep whatever kid they can
Right.
into their room. With eHallpass, you have a simple, easy way of being able to, say, I have this kid. This kid is with me. It doesn't require a phone call. You just open up your eHallpass, which you have as a teacher open all the time anyway, and you just simply say, I'm checking this kid in. And the system, the dashboard, the live dashboard that shows every adult in the building how many kids are in the hall, reduces that number by 1. And so, if you had 8 kids at the start of that drill that had an emergency, that were in the hall during that emergency, you'd hopefully find 0 at the end, or maybe you'd whittle it down to 1 or 2. And then those are the kids that you'd be able to tell your security team, hey, they left this area. They were probably heading to this area. So somewhere in that vicinity is where we should concentrate and look for, those kids. So, yeah.
I think, in general, what, we're spending more time talking about eHallpass than I generally do in our shows, because I think it's such an interesting product. And I think efficiency and culture, safety, a lot of the entrepreneurs that we talk to, especially in the education space, at the end of the day, those are 3 things they want to solve. Let's begin to land this plane in the next couple of minutes. And I want to, kind of look back and ask you one last question, or 2 last questions. But, if you are kind of a rule breaker and you see opportunities, but at the end of the day, you are happy to go against the grain, what would 13-year-old Nathan think of Hallpass? If you were like, I'm going to make this, and you said to 13-year-old Nathan, this is what I'm going to do, what would he say to you?
So I'm in school and Hallpass comes to me as a student.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's
And
actually
13-year-old
happened. I
Nathan,
have two kids right now that are in a high school. They're twins, and Hallpass just came to their school.
okay.
But um, you know, I'm not exactly sure where to go with that question, but I think one, I would be intrigued by it as a
Okay.
13-year-old going, hey, why is this being developed? What is the purpose of it? And I probably, yeah, I could probably see myself maybe being a little rebellious about it because, it does have that accountability to it. But my own background, I most of my schooling, I didn't have hall passes because I grew up,
Right.
in a different school system, and in Austrian school system they don't use hall passes in the same way, and neither did the boarding school that I went to. But so I don't know if I would have had an issue with it, but I definitely, I went to Chipotle and got a sandwich, and I was wearing this shirt, and the student goes, "Hey, Hall Pass, we had that in our school,"
Really?
and she said, "Yeah." She said, "Yeah, your system was the reason I got in trouble a couple of times," and she kind of laughed, and then she came up to me afterwards while I was eating my sandwich. I know I gave you a hard time earlier, but I just want you to know, thank you for developing Hallpass to keep me and my students safe. And that was something I hadn't even mentioned it at all. It wasn't just, I know that's kind of why you developed it. And she just instantly internalized that, which I thought
That's great.
was fantastic. Yeah, so I don't know if I could answer any more than on the spur of the top of my head here, what the 13-year-old me would have said. But yeah, that gives you a bit of a flavor anyway.
No, I think that's it. And I appreciate you being honest. That's one of the things that we didn't necessarily talk through before. But when I think about my 13-year-old self, what would I have thought about this? And I don't think I would have been as mature as that young lady who came up to you and said,
Yeah,
"Don't
right.
make a
Well, she had
mistake."
already finished school too, so
Yeah. And granted, schools were different when we were going to school.
yeah.
I don't think safety was on top of mind. I think I probably would have been more in the camp of, dude, you're screwing me up here. Like I used to just say 19 times a day, I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But now you're talking to 43-year-old Josh, who really admires you, as a person, given your journey. I love the fact that you lived abroad, and who was the guy from Shawshank who got things done inside school, and now you've got some really neat products. And I want to kind of we will stay in touch.
Yeah.
You're going to help me plan my trip to Germany, but we're going to stay in touch here, because I'm sure you've got other amazing ideas inside that head, in addition to the poop squeeze balls. So totally appreciate you being on the show. I think it's inspirational, and you were really honest about the challenges and opportunities of being a rule breaker, which is what we got in our audience.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, my bottom line, I think my encouragement to almost anybody is don't put your head, don't try and be invisible. Find the area where you can authentically solve issues and believe that you can make a difference. It's almost an obligation to, to whatever organization that you're a part of, is to believe that you can contribute, you can make things better, you can, whether it's developing something that turns out to make money. That was not at all what I was trying to do. I just was having fun, making things better, and it turned out that one thing led to another, and it's where we ended up. But nobody should try and solve problems because they have that end point in mind. Just do it because it needs to be done, and believe that you can be that person. And yeah, and surround yourself with good people, because none of this got done just by itself. People had to share their ideas, people had to give feedback, and you had to have good people join your team and believe in what you were trying to accomplish. So
Yeah, cool, man. Well, sounds like you're encouraging people to be passionate and break the rules at the same time, and we appreciate that here. So totally appreciate you joining. We'll be in touch, and please airmail me that poop squeeze ball once you
I
get
will
it
do
going.
that. I will do
I'm a
that.
big fan of you and the squeeze ball.
Very good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for listening. Next time on How I Broke That.